everyone, and we are live. And tonight I'm going to be looking for my guest host for the next moment or so. Hopefully he logs on so I can send him an invite. Let's see. How's everyone's evening going? Hope all is well. Let's see. Whoop. Oh, the fun of live events. Hello, hello. Just waiting to see if my co-host jumps on. I know he was active just a little bit ago. Let's see, where are you? Why won't you let me search today? Whoop. Here we go. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello? Is it working?
Hello.
I can hear
your
you.
icon. I don't
can't see anything,
you.
though.
Let me see. Let me try it one more time. Hold
on. Okay, give me one second.
And maybe you can always try to invite me. For whatever reason, my invite, it looks like it's a little glitchy on my end. But that's been the day I've had. Let's see, why can I not invite help? Why am I having problems? Here, go back. There we go.
There.
There you are. Oh,
Did that work?
So you have figured it out because I obviously was having a little glitch on my end.
It's all good. All good. My phone is often weird also, so.
Well, it's nice to officially meet you. I've been watching your TikToks for a little while now.
And
I
have watched yours.
Oh, well, good. Thank you. Hello. And well, one thing I want to say is what I like to do when I don't know if you've ever watched any of my lives before, but I'll let you talk about because you have an upcoming novel, right? This summer?
Yep.
Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I was like, I thought my dates were correct. So maybe you give your little spiel about your novel, and then I'll do kind of the same on my end, just because we potentially have different viewers, and it's nice for everybody to know who is talking tonight.
Absolutely. Well, I am Neal Romreill. I am a debut author. I started writing officially, like for real, I guess you could say, around the time COVID started, and oddly enough, had a lot of time at home, and so was able to finish a book finally. I've been trying to write books for a long time, but I never kind of got over the hump. So, I've got a couple of them back here, but this is my debut novel. It is called Site Alpha. But I actually, so I wrote the book, I worked with an editor, and was at the time just going to self-publish. And my editor was like, you really should query this book. Like, I think there might be people that would want to read it besides just you and your family. And really at that point, that was kind of all I really intended to do with it. And so I queried and actually was signed by an indie publisher for a time. And unfortunately, that kind of fell apart in the end, and we couldn't quite come to terms that would be agreeable to both parties. So I ended up self-publishing, and my book comes out on June 28th. So that is kind of the story of how it came to be.
Okay, well, what is your genre? Is it urban fantasy? I feel like that was right, but again, I may have.
Yeah, I called it urban fantasy. I'm again, when I say I'm a new author, I'm really new because like I had to learn all this stuff as far as it takes place in like modern day America. So it takes place in Phoenix, Arizona in 2019. But there are obviously fantastical elements to it. There are cryptids like Bigfoot, Mothman, things like that are seen or discussed. There is some tech that is obviously not realistic tech to what we modernly have. So it's it's fantasy, but with a modern day feel to it. So.
Hey, I like that. No, it's interesting how there are so many ways to categorize and subcategorize fantasy. So, for me, that I think that's always fascinating. Try to find new terms, because I think the latest term that I affixed to for one of my series was portal fantasy, and I've clung to that ever since I heard about it. And I was just like, oh, I love this concept, and then realized all that genre and what it entailed, and thought that was fascinating. But that is so neat. So,
Absolutely.
what inspired you to write your book in particular? Like, how did this idea
Come
unveil?
to fruition. So, as COVID started shutting things down, I've got daughters who are in. My youngest will graduate high school this year, and my oldest is in college right now. And so they had all, of course, had to come home because everything is being shut down. And so we were just
Mhm.
staying up late one night and talking about books and storytelling, and I come from like a long line of storytellers. My grandfather, that was like something he did as a pastime, was like tell stories around the campfires and stuff like that. And he's written a couple books, and my dad did the same thing. And so I like telling stories, but again, I've had a hard time writing them down. And so we were talking about just random stuff, and the concept of like Bigfoot fan fiction came up. Oddly enough, we were just kind of goofing around, and they're like, "Dad, you could totally write a book better than this." And I was like, "Well." But anyway, so I kind of started getting these ideas in my head about a society that like keeps cryptids. The reason like we can't figure it, like the reason we don't know that they exist is because there's a group that actually actively keeps us from finding out about them, essentially is what's going
Yep.
on. And so that's where the premise of the book came from, and eventually it grew to what it is now. So,
Well, I'll admit I have a couple books on cryptozoology on my bookshelf just because I think that's always fascinating, anyways. So that is kind of fun for me. Oh, I have
absolutely.
a question actually for you from one of my followers asking, where will your book be available when it publishes?
So it is currently available for pre-order on all the places you would think of: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all those good sites. You can get it. I mean, I've gone through Ingram Spark, so it is available internationally, I believe, as well. It should, as far as I know, it will release day and date. So I mean, if you go through Amazon and you pre-order it, technically it'll probably come like a couple days later. Barnes and Noble, I'm not sure because I've never dealt with them officially, but I know that again you can pre-order it there. So pretty much everywhere you can order a book, you can order my book. So and some places I know sometimes you have to look up my name, and I don't know why it just hasn't. For some reason, it hasn't populated yet for the name of the book, but the name of the author for some reason works. So anyway, if you're having trouble finding it though, look up my name and you should find it wherever it is. So
There, said thank you. So there you go. You may have a new reader just down the pike. But
that's
yeah,
awesome.
no, one of the funny things is I recently moved back to Georgia, from New Orleans, and I'm now in the North Georgia part versus more centralized. Anywho, this whole area is obsessed with Sasquatch and claims that there's a whole population of Sasquatch in the Georgia mountains, which I have no idea how this came about. I haven't actually looked up the history, but there's supposed to be a museum out somewhere out here and all that. So,
There is,
again,
there is. Well,
that's
you and I
that's
are neighbors. Then I actually live in South Carolina, so that's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, there's a museum up in like north of Anderson somewhere, South Carolina. That's about there's like a whole town that has a Bigfoot festival. So they really like their Bigfoot here in Appalachia. So
okay. Well, there you go. I got now. I have to like look it up and be like, why? Where did this Appalachian, Sasquatch come from? Where? What is the origin of this story? I love origins of mythos. Anywho, but yeah. So as for me, I guess for my writing, I've been writing for a few years, but I'm one of those slow starters. It took me forever to figure out how to just do things the right way. And so even though my first book was published in 2016, it really wasn't until a few years ago that I kind of started figuring out how to reach potential readers. And so, I think only the past couple years I can really qualify myself as an author, because I have people reading my book, which is exciting. And, it's, I love it. I love it. But as for my writing, I'm also fantasy, but I kind of do different genres as well. I have 3 different series at current. My first one, my debut novellas, which you can kind of see. I'm going to in the top area with the animals and the 4 colors. I have 4 books in that series. That's called the Incarn Saga, and starts with Asara's Claws, a book in blue. And it's about a kingdom on the verge of war where both the human populace and the native shapeshifter population have to figure out if they can push aside their differences in order to fend off an oncoming evil. So that's the premise of that series, and you kind of follow my main character, who is a shapeshifter, as she's drafted and heads off to war. But since then, I'm trying to do what I do not advise, but simultaneously publish 2 different series. One of which is see if I can do, oh, there, I got it. Okay, the young adult adventure fantasy, my portal fantasy. I have 2 out right now. The series is called the Jed Chronicles. The first is the 12 Task. And this is just a young adult, just a fun action-packed series. I love mythology, so I'm incorporating mythos from all around the world in it, in this kind of multiverse that deals with 12 magical planets and the concept of at different points of history, life in existence is threatened. And during those moments, a prophesied hero, or in this case, heroine, arises to kind of make sure everything's set right. And if not, existence could cease. So life will cease to be. But that's that one. And then my other series right now, they're really dark right now, but in the bottom, they are my speaking fast, my adult dark Viking fantasy novella series. So that one, you're going to deal a lot with Norse mythology, the 9 worlds in and around Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and you start with some more obscure myth and kind of head further and further into the mythology until you start glimpsing the Loki and Odin way down the line. But that's for me, I love that series. It's fun to write. They're quick little reads, but they are in the darker end.
Well, that's a hot genre right now. Vikings is like all over the place. So.
I know, it was kind of the funny thing is, like, I've been gearing up a while with my idea of trying to put out some kind of quick release series. And since my full lengths are really what I consider fairly meaty in this for a indie book, I was trying to figure out how to challenge myself to write some shorter series books so I could help publish more than just one every 1.5 years. I was going really slow in comparison to some other people. And I know you shouldn't compare, but I really wanted to kind of plump up my repertoire. So challenging myself to write novellas was fun, and hitting that mark with Vikings and Nordic mythology is fun too. So yeah.
Sounds awesome. So yeah, I'll definitely have to check. I actually have one of your books, but I apologize. I forgot which one it was I bought. I think it was the YA series. So I think I bought the first one of that one. But yeah, I that's one of my favorite things about TikTok is I've met so many new people and like encountered so many new authors. It's just mind-blowing to me. Like there's so much talent out there. It's just amazing. So I would probably never have encountered some people had it not been for this app. And it's awesome. I get to read new stories and meet new authors, and it's great. So
oh, that's definitely true. Everybody who I talk to, it seems like, at least for them as well as myself, it's fun to meet fellow authors or other people who in the bookish community in general. And my experience, and I've only just started in comparison to some people, but TikTok is like the place to be if you like books.
I have to agree.
Not kidding. So how long have you been on this app? Because I've kind of started in the fall.
Well, so when I very first, like the day I finished my novel, I joined Twitter because at that time, like I'd started kind of like looking, and it's like, you should probably go to Twitter and you can meet people. And so it wasn't until last year, it was probably about a year ago this month, I think. It was like towards the end of this month last year that I actually started like expanding out a little bit and like got my Instagram set up and I came to TikTok, and it was I'll be honest, I was one of those people. I mean, I'm older, I get it, but I was kind of like, I don't know if I need another app to, do stuff on. And yet I came here and it was like, you can make videos, you can edit things very easily, you can like you can see facial traits. It's like stuff that Twitter just doesn't do well. And it was like,
Yeah.
man, why have I not been on this app sooner? Like I just so yeah,
Oh yeah.
going to my year anniversary, I'd say. So
That's so fun. Yeah, I have not reached that level yet, but I kind of like you. I avoided it. I avoided it for a while, and I think it was because, like, kind of like what you were saying, is you get overwhelmed because there's so many different options out there, and
yes,
that's nice because certain options work better for some people than others. But TikTok's such a friendly platform that it's so easy to communicate with not only readers but authors and do things like this, these kind of live chats, which I'm having a lot of fun taking advantage of because I'm meeting people from all around the world and talking about, what we love, books.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, what's funny is, of course, like the one video I got that would be like that had the most views by a lot. I mean, by miles. It was like 600,000 something views. Had nothing to do with books. Like it was just a dumb little joke about Tootsie Pop. So it's like that's the video that somehow blows up, and it's like, man, if I could get some of my book ones to do that, that'd be cool. But
Now, here's a trick that someone was mentioning to me was always have your books either in poster form or on shelves in the background, because even if you do something silly like that and that trends, they're kind of
they'll
having,
see it.
that visual of it, and eventually if they see something enough, they start asking about it. What was that seven touches? I forgot who talks about the seven touches, but you come in contact with something seven times, you're more likely to invest in that thing, whatever that is.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Now
I need to get a cool poster like you have.
I only just got it, and I only just created it, and thankfully I thought it was going to be more complicated because I had to figure out how to reverse images, but that's actually not that complicated to do. I don't know. I'm not tech savvy, so everything takes me a long time to test out, and then even still, that doesn't mean I'm successful at it. So, but that wasn't that bad. But yeah, the whole reverse poster, I really dig this concept, and I'm happy when I see other people um, using that. And I was talking with an author last week, A.K. Mulford, and she actually got hers up before me, and I was just like, no, because I had that same idea, but again, I was so hesitant, and I was happy that she did. It inspired me to actually do it. But
Well, good, 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 good.
okay, so is your book going to be a series or is it a standalone?
So it's definitely that's another part of the whole like the indie publishing thing. One of the places we couldn't quite agree. They very much wanted something that was like closed. You know what I'm saying? Like they wanted it to end. They wanted it to be final. And yet
Hmm.
my beta readers really didn't like the original ending. They didn't really like the way it kind of finalized everything. A lot of the feedback was stuff like, I feel like the story needs to go further. Like I need more of what's going on here. And so the original way I'd envisioned it, we'll be super honest, I'd envisioned it being 3 books, but they were each kind of like about different people. Like I was going to kind of base it like a character in each about my 3 daughters, kind of. That totally
Oh,
got blown up, totally got destroyed through the whole process. But it is still going to be a series. I've actually started the sequel to this book already. It's not anywhere near as prepared as it needs to be yet, but it's working. I'm getting there. So yeah, there'll be at least 3 books in this series when it's all said and done. So
that is so exciting. No, that is so exciting. And everybody works at different paces and life gets in the way of things a lot of times. That's my excuse for this year so far about outside factors of life getting in the way of my writing goals. I'm still moving ahead. It's just not where I want to be. Idealistically. So I totally understand that. But that is cool. So what if they're not going to be broken up by different characters, is it the same character then going through the potential whole series?
Well, it is still, they all have common threads. Like all the three kind of characters that I originally set out to kind of create a book for, all kind of intertwine now. So even though the first book really only comes from one perspective, truly, like there is another perspective in there, but the main focus is the character Charlotte. Well, Charlotte carries on to the next, part of the series. That's not too much of a spoiler, but like, how she's interwoven is different because she goes through a lot of changes, obviously, through this course of the story. And so her role becomes different in future books versus what some of the other characters have to rise up and now, take on this mantle of leadership or different things like that and taking the lead in certain actions. So it does help to kind of, they all still kind of bind together, but you will see bigger focuses on different people per, in each book. So
Yay! I think you just got some roses sent on my screen about your description. So
cool.
just letting you know that, but but no, that's really neat. Yeah, for me, when I write series at the moment, I usually have one main character, a bunch of others that are, really big characters, but I follow just one point of view throughout the series, and I'm trying to decide if I should ever broach into that style of writing where I have multiple, one of those that like you switch maybe each chapter back and forth with a handful of people's personas and just trying to get in their heads. But that's a that sounds like a lot to me. So it always intimidates me a little bit trying to get, I guess, that entrenched in some other character's mindset. But no, that is really kind of cool.
Well, one of the things I don't like about like the modern like superhero movies and stuff like that is I feel like there's almost never any real danger. You know what I'm saying? And when you have a series where there's going to be the same character in theory, I need there to be something that has like there's got to be a bit of some kind of element of danger, right? So when I say this character is going to continue, well, are they going to continue in the same way? Just because
Oh
you remove a character doesn't mean you have to kill the character, but you
yeah.
might cause the character to have to take a different role. And so I feel like there has to be some level of some level of danger, some level of whatever you want to call it, but that keeps the reader guessing just a little bit. So
You don't have to answer this question if it's going to spoil anything, if you think. But do you envision yourself to be an author that will potentially kill characters off, unalive
oh,
them? I guess.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, what's funny is like I very much like I enjoy a bad ending to a movie. I know that sounds horrible to some people, but like I am perfectly fine if like the good guys lose. I'm like, whoo, that's cool because it doesn't happen very often. And I realize that's very probably unique to me. There's probably not a lot of people that enjoy that, but I want there to be like a character that grips you emotionally enough that if they die, like it matters, And so but they have to die for that to happen, And so it's okay. I'll try to spare some of them, but
Yeah, I do. Let me see. My young adult series, I try to make sure most of my characters survive, but it's a young adult series. My older series, so my shifter one's a new adult, and then my Viking one's an adult series. Both of them, it's free for all. So good or bad, there's no guarantee. And I'm kind of like that mindset that when I'm writing my darker work, in reality, the good people don't always win. The villains don't always get their comeuppance. There is that level of frustration for people because everybody wants it,
yes.
wants justice served, and sometimes justice isn't served, at least not the way you expect it to be. So I don't mind that in writing, but I also understand that's not everybody's cup of tea. There's surprisingly a lot of people who enjoy that, but it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Absolutely. Well, I wrote one of the chapters that came out of the book involved removing a character that I think would have gone badly had I ended up keeping that. Like the people that read it were like, "Oh, you can't do that!" Like they were very upset. I was like, "Okay, there does have to be some level of like give and take there. You can't just pull the rug out from under people just for the sake of pulling the rug out." So it's
Yeah, that's true too. You gotta give having some level of hope is always a good thing to have in a story, even though it may not be a happy story. they were very, I think that is one thing, is there's that fine line where when you write darker things, you want to make sure you don't go overboard because you might lose people, at least lose them too early. Try to keep them hooked until the last book. Then if you lose them,
Right.
at least they've read through.
Yeah,
That's an
exactly. Yeah,
author
I think
side of
once you
me.
get to that third book, yeah, once you get to that third book, boy, or fourth or whatever, whenever the series is coming to an end, it is all hands on deck. You can do whatever you want to at that point. So,
Oh man. No, that's funny. Oh gosh. Oh, I've actually, going back to what you were saying earlier, you said you started on Twitter as when you were trying to build your author platform. And for me, that's one of the hardest platforms to build, but I think it's because I was approaching it, or have been approaching it, maybe not the best way. And recently, another author here who's doing very, very well on Twitter, was giving some tips about it, and I was just like, oh, I need to like readjust how I do things. So, how do you approach Twitter when you kind of communicate? Because again, each platform's different, and each one.
so I found on Twitter, number one is on Twitter, almost nobody cares if you're talking about yourself. Like if you say something about you, it's like, yeah, whatever. We're gonna ignore that. Um, the level of like interaction tends to be greater when you're asking for interaction from the people on Twitter, if that makes sense. If you ask people a question, hey, I want to know X, Y, and Z from you, you'll find that a lot more people will come and answer, versus if you say something like, man, had a really tough day doing X today, or man, the editing was just. Whereas on TikTok, man, if you put something like, man, my editor hates me because I wrote something terrible, people laugh, people interact, people leave comments. On Twitter, they're like, whatever, go peddle your sadness somewhere else. So yeah, if you ask a lot of questions, if you ask people there's stuff about them, you tend to get a lot of reaction on Twitter. On
But I
TikTok, it's a
think,
lot more like have fun.
yeah, I can see that. I think, but any kind of engagement thing, it kind of, again, that's the point. It's to get interaction, and most people, even if they're introverted or extroverted, when you have that safe space, as a lot of social media gives them, they're more apt to be engaging if people just ask. I have a comment here from Ray Blossom 1123 saying he had a Sonic comment on a post. He is a Twitter professional.
So yes, I made a comment about Sonic, the fast food companies, one of their milkshakes, and they responded to my Twitter post. I do remember that happening. So
That's
so yeah,
actually
I've
fair.
actually had a couple people respond to stuff I've done on Twitter, like actual big accounts. But yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I have to figure out how to work that one better. That one I'm pretty weak on. And Instagram, it's kind of been hard for me since I've never figured that one out as well either. But again, it's a learning thing. And for whatever reason, certain people do better on certain platforms because they get it maybe more than I do.
Probably. I can say this. When I sent out Ark Reads, I guarantee you 90% of my Ark Reads came from TikTok versus Twitter. I did get Twitter signups, so I mean it wasn't like there was nobody there but I got a lot more response from TikTok than I did from Twitter. So go
Yeah,
figure.
for me, I originally got a lot through Facebook, but then since I started TikTok and started opening it up that way, I've kind of, like you said, started seeing a lot more quicker build and engagement, I guess, that way for Arc readers and everything. And yay, thank you, Arc readers. And if anybody who's watching doesn't know what they are, let's give it a spiel. Arc readers are oh my god, a tongue tie. Man, I'm speaking fast today. Advanced reader copy is what Arc stands for, and an Arc reader essentially is a person who gets a book for free in exchange for an honest review upon publication. Sometimes you can work with the author and get already published books for free, again, in the hopes of giving an honest review and posting that on big platforms. So if you're interested in being Arc readers, his is open and mine is open. Check us out. We like them. They're interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so what? Okay, if you're writing and you were describing it as kind of an urban fantasy, definitely a fantasy set in kind of modern terms, I'm trying to rehash your words. So, what do you read then if you have time to read between everything?
everything. Yeah, it's you know what's funny is being an author, I've read a lot more books in the last couple of years because I want to get better at my craft, I guess if you say. But so I I read a lot of horror, even though I don't feel like I would be confident in. Hello to somebody. I see somebody popping up on the screen saying hi. I don't feel confident in writing horror, but I love reading horror. As I mentioned with liking bad movie endings and things like that. Fantasy is kind of my always go to, and so I've read mostly fantasy, mostly horror in the last couple of years. I every now and then will try to branch out a little bit. I honestly like romance was something I never read before, and that's just because I don't know, like it didn't vibe with me maybe or whatever. But joining TikTok, joining Twitter, and encountering like so many different genres, I have actually tried to reach out and like beta read and do different things like that with romance authors because I want to get to kind of know what that is. And I've actually found myself very much enjoying a lot more stories now because I've kind of expanded that whatever you want to call it, the genres that I'll read. And so it's very cool, very cool. So.
Yeah, no, I think I'm starting to trend that way. I will admit my favorite genre to read is obscure because I like ancient epic prose and poetry. So I'm that person who will sit down and read the Iliad. That is me. I am that person. So a lot of my bookshelves are essentially what the source material for mythologies are, just because that fascinates me. With that said, since I write fantasy into a modern audience. Um, yeah, so I've been trying to challenge myself to read contemporary fantasy, which surprised me because I looked around and I was like, wow, I really have a lot to catch up on. And so that's why I've started to build my wish list and engage with people and start throwing books on there because I'm like, oh, yes, I should try to read a lot more. And I'm learning so many being here on this community. And what I try to do is all the authors who I talk with, I try to make sure I have your book on my wish list so then I see it and get it when it gets to the point of your name at the top of my kitty. So, but it allows me to read new genres.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I when I was a kid, like I read when I was like in really little school, like I would read like Hardy Boys and things like that, like a lot of the kind of I don't know what you want to call it, but like a kind of an elementary school. And then my cousin gave me a Stephen King book when I was in like fifth or sixth grade. And that was it, man. I was off to the races. I started going to the library for like adult books then because I wanted like real stories versus the stuff that I'd been reading up to that point. And so I used to, I've read a ton of Terry Brooks, like Sword of Shannara series and all that stuff. That really kind of got me kickstarted into the fantasy genres. Obviously, I went back and read Tolkien. My dad actually gave me The Hobbit at some point. He that was one of his favorite books when he was a kid, and so I read, but yeah, I just once I kind of got a hold of that, it's just been, so.
Oh yeah, I can understand. I mean, I was of the era that I grew up with Harry Potter. That was like the intro into the fantasy. I did try to read Lord of the Rings when I was what I would say was probably too young because most of it went over my head, and then I backed away. I think from some of the more dense fantasy literature for a little while. But since then, like right now, I'm trying to tackle Wheel of Time, and I know that's a
Right.
lengthy endeavor, but I'm enjoying it a lot. And so again, I'm trying to catch up with some of these more iconic ones, as well as some of these newbie authors who are, there is so much out there, and it is exciting.
It is absolutely. Absolutely.
So, as a newish author, what would be your biggest advice to an up and coming writer who wants to pursue becoming an author?
Well, so I actually one of the things I would say first and foremost to somebody who's starting out is I promise when you think your book's ready, it's not ready yet. Is kind of the best way to put it. Like we all write this book and we all are like super like, ooh, we're jazzed, we're ready, we want to get it out there. And it's like, go through the process, slow down, get it in front of beta readers. I learned so much. I mean, that's the one thing that I can really say very positively came out of my time with my indie publisher. I got tons of total strangers reading my book. and that is the information they give you will be invaluable because they don't care. They're not your friends, they're not your family, they're not going to hold any punches. So if there's a problem, they'll let you know. And so my book that I a long time ago thought, oh, this is a great book, it'll be ready, that book was terrible. Like, that draft was awful. This book, much better. The one that is ready to be published now. But that took a lot of time. And so just because you wrote the book and just because you're like, this book is great and your friends all tell you it's great, go through the process. Really, really find folks that are going to be honest with you and let you know, what's good, what's bad, what can be fixed, what can be adjusted. And don't just run out and start querying, because I totally did that. I mean, it did end up working out for me, but that was only after some long, hard, truth telling in the process of getting rejections. So.
Okay, I will admit also, this new format of the lives, I can't tell. I'm assuming now that we see the same.
I see some of the same things popping up.
Okay, then I was like, because I know originally you couldn't do that, but it's all changed its format since last week, and now I'm like, oh, this is all new to me. Okay, cool.
Oh,
okay,
good.
so then I don't necessarily have to read everything out when it pops up on my end. Perfect. But yeah, for me, I guess my biggest advice that I've been giving out is, and you did it sounds like, is even before you publish, start building your platform. Say, market yourself as an upcoming writer or an upcoming author, for a debut novel, and go from there, because you don't want to do what I did and sit 2 years on a published book and have no idea what to do and why I couldn't reach people. You want to be actively trying to go and reach people. And because you have so many options now with all these different platforms, hashtag book talk, it's easy to get people now interested. And so by the time you publish, you already have readers waiting in the wings. So that, I thought, is my seed of advice that I wish I knew back then.
It's good advice.
Okay, so you also mentioned, I think, near the beginning, about how you had an editor first. Where did you find your initial editor? Because the people find them all over the board.
Yes, they do. Well, so what's wild is my wife has a friend who is a published author, kind of locally. He's put out a bunch of kind of like local, I don't want to say history, it's more like folklore about South Carolina and stuff like that. And so we talked to him and said, do you have any suggestions? Because, and part of it is I wanted to find a professional. I could have, I probably could have gone out and found somebody that quote unquote would have done it, but I was looking for a professional. So I went to somebody who is a published author, found out from them, and actually was able to communicate with that individual, and she kind of did my first editing pass. Now, I will say this, because I made a TikTok about it a long time ago. I absolutely shouldn't have edited that book at that time and paid for the editing at that time. I did. It's fine. I came out the other side okay, and it helped, but it was probably too early in the process to have done that. But it was she was fantastic. She did an excellent job. And then in my subsequent drafts, my youngest daughter, who wants to eventually be an editor, actually did the editing on my book and really did a bang up job. I mean, I'll be honest, it is way above and beyond what I would have expected, in just being able to do it in-house, which has been a blessing. So it kind of ended up coming back to be good in the reverse, but it was a lot of money up front that I probably didn't need to spend initially. So
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, I'm a big advocate to making sure you use a professional editor, but yeah, you have to know when is the right time to get them on board, because there are so many stages. There are people who use alpha readers, which I don't necessarily, but I do have some people who beta, and that's, I think, essential before I go and pay the editor, because depending on how editors get paid, some get paid by length of time they work, which is the one
yes.
who I've been working with, which the less they have to edit, the less I have to pay, which I like. So make do it. Make sure it's as good as possible on your end before you send it out. But yeah, I like that. That is cool
Absolutely.
advice. Yeah. So who now is then your cover designer?
So again, very lucky to have my daughter who's in college. She's got a friend who is a fantastic artist, and I think I actually made a TikTok about it not long ago, but showing kind of the cover progressions. And Ty, who did the cover, read the book and then submitted some like cover designs based on what they'd read, and it was like, again, it was just mind blowing because I mean, I paid. It wasn't, it wasn't that I got them for free. I mean, I got a friend's discount probably, but I still, I still paid what would be the going rate for them. But yeah, it was very just, I knew that they had done like drawings because they were in, my daughter was in a D&D campaign and they had done like drawings, like, different character designs and things like that. So I knew they were capable artists. But just to be able to have that, and I get tons of compliments on the cover, and it's really, again, I have nothing to do with that. It's the fact that Ty was just had an eye for that kind of thing and really pulled together a great cover. So
Oh, that's cool. I think, like, I don't know why this popped in my head right now, but I do think it's interesting how D&D talk kind of overlaps with fantasy, overlaps with book talk, because my fiance, he really likes right now to create characters for D&D, but he's not skilled with the art part, but he's been doing, the crafting of the characters and the building the designs. And the funny thing is, based off one of my Viking series and the concept of Fulgia, these spirit animals, guardian spirits essentially in animal form that each person has, he's developing a creature based off that for D&D. And so it is kind of one of those art inspires art in different ways. So that is kind of cool.
that's awesome. I love it.
So, okay, so what is your favorite book? Let me ask.
So I get this question fairly often, and it's very hard for me because, like, I'm kind of one of those people that gets really set in my ways. I will say that the book that I go back to and read a lot is Stephen King's book Desperation. It's about the little town in Nevada that goes all crazy. Part of that, I think, is just like a nostalgia thing. I bought that book on a birthday of mine a long time ago. It was before I was married. And I literally, like, that day, it was just all I did that day was I bought the book, I sat in a coffee shop, and I read the book all day, basically. And it's like, I couldn't put it down. It was one of those moments. So that's probably the book I've read the most. My current, probably favorite book, that one's really hard.
You can say you don't have one favorite, because that's
I
my
don't
go-to
have one
answer.
favorite book. Well, because I'm really bad. Like, I'm really bad with like modern stuff because anymore when I read stuff, it's usually by like indie authors, and so I don't want to like pick one over another because I like all their books really
All
well.
fair.
So.
Let's be politically real savvy right here. That is all fair.
So.
I'm okay with that. No, like,
But
for
there's a bunch
me,
of books I'm waiting for. Let's put it that way. There's a bunch of books I'm wanting to buy as soon as they come out. So.
okay. How about this? Name one of the books. One, understanding that there are more of them that you are interested in getting in the near future.
So Astrid Knight, who is on TikTok, has a book coming out called Perception Check. It's coming out this month. I don't remember the exact date. It's later in this month. Absolutely. It's a D&D, like, kind of fantasy based, like modern fantasy, but she takes it as like, what if D&D became real? And I'm super excited about that book. And so that Astrid Knight, look her up. That would be my personal current recommendation that I know is coming out very soon. So Perception Check.
You had that on far. I love that. Oh man, but no, like, for me, I'm just built like it's kind of what we were mentioning earlier. I've been building that by wish list and learned about wishlist here. So that's a great way for me to like keep track of all the books that I'm interested in without just forgetting about them. I mean, like, wait, there was that book which was about the Fae and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't know, I have no idea. I just remembered I saw it, but now I can't go find it again. So I like that concept of being able, now I can go back through and get them every time I have some spare change.
I don't think I've put it on my wish list, but I keep telling myself I need to go put a Sarah J. Maas book on my wish list just to have one on there because I haven't read any of Sarah J. Maas's stuff yet. I'm like, she's all over Twitter or Twitter and TikTok. So one of these days I just need to buckle under it and read one of the books there. But anyway.
Yeah, I think I do have the first two, I don't remember, Throne and Glass on my wish list because I have not read it. And like you said, it's one of those that is talked about so much. And I also want to be in that language where I get the references, I get the jokes. Plus, I want to know what is the appeal because authors learn from authors. Everybody's trying to, educate themselves and become a better writer in a sense. And so it is kind of, and she's a established one enough that she knows something. I want to know what it is.
Absolutely. So,
But
yeah.
she's a little more on the romance side, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Well, that's why, like I said, I would, 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't have picked up a romance book, not because, again, it's just they didn't connect with me at that time. But having actually beta read and done some reading for folks that do write in that genre, it's like, okay, they're characters still. It's a story, and you get connected to those characters, and you just sometimes you're approaching it from a different way. Sometimes you're seeing things that you don't always, fantasy and action and adventure and stuff like that's really fast and easy to read, but there's still a story there, And so with the romance, it's one of the things I've really learned is that these characters have stories. There's a lot of like the interconnectivity and the emotions that they're going through. And so all you got to do is just put yourself in that headspace and you start to like kind of appreciate that more. And so anyway, I'm learning. I'm getting there.
Well, I mean, I think any author benefits from reading outside their genre at least a little bit. And the fact that, like, for me, I know one of my weak parts is the fact that I incorporate romance in my books to some level, but they're not romance books by any means. And to read romance would help me probably be a little better about that aspect of my writing, I feel like, because I know that is an important part because romance is part of life. It is.
Very
And
true.
even if that's not necessarily going to be a major theme of your book, it's good to be able to, whatever aspect or level you're going to incorporate, make it vibrant, make it real, make it, sound correct. And that's where I feel like I might be a little flat, but someone can point that out if that's the case. If not, that's cool too. But I feel if I had to nitpick on my own writing, I would say that would be probably a point that I would personally like to improve upon. How about you? Can you introspect enough and be like, this is something that I feel like I could try to do better next time?
Oh man, that could be the whole thing. No, yes, number one, obviously romance. I think one of my biggest challenges right now is making dialogue that I feel like is believable, like that it feels natural. You know what I'm saying? Like that's still a struggle sometimes that I'll read something, I'll feel like, does this just sound like a cardboard character or does this sound like a real human being? I feel pretty confident like when I'm describing an action sequence or when I'm describing scenery or when I'm setting the mood or things, I feel pretty good about that. But sometimes those moments where you're reading like, does this just sound like somebody's just like word vomiting in the middle of a page and that doesn't, like so yeah, that's the place that I really have tried. And when I talk about the difference between a first draft and the draft that is currently ready to be published, that's a lot of that difference is that there were characters that just weren't unique enough. There weren't characters that had a proper voice. And a lot of that's been developed by reading books, to your point, going and reading other authors and kind of seeing what it is that makes their characters work, helped me make my characters better. So.
Yeah, no, and that's why it's always advisable for authors to read a lot. So authors are readers as well for the most part. And I know life can get in the way and you can get busy, especially, no matter if you're a full-time author or you have a full-time job and you write on the side, it's sometimes hard to squeeze in at times to read, but, to trying to eke that out a little bit each week, if not a little bit each day is, I think, actually invaluable as an author. And I'm trying to be better about that.
I noticed the person talking about the cardboard characters. That is actually that is a kind of a funny idea if you had just cardboard characters everywhere. Um, but yeah, yeah. um, well,
I like that. I like that.
for me, one of the other things for me is like when I came into writing. I mean, honestly, I couldn't have told you. I mean, I was like maybe a B student at best when it came to English. I could have told you like what the different POVs exactly were. Like, is this third person omnipresent or is this, like a lot of that stuff, like I had to just kind of learn or do and fix by trial and error. And so that's made a big difference too, is reading other people with other types of perspectives and things like that, because some of those were just things I couldn't have done had I not studied and read, because it wouldn't have come natural to me. I can tell you that. So
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. And another aspect of it is, as the more you write, the better, I think, for the most part, you become. So, at book one, you're doing spectacular. And then the next book, you want to challenge yourself and you're going to improve. And then at some point, you're going to look back at your first book and be like, I published that, and kind of hide your face. But that doesn't mean it's a bad book. And that's what I love and loathe about my first book, Asara's Claws, is because it was my first. It's always you're going to start somewhere. And I love it. It had some nice accreditation and awards. But when I go back to it, I kind of cringe sometimes if I have to read certain excerpts, because I'm like, it was a first book, wasn't it? But even still, it, I don't know. I have that love scenario with my debut one, and then I have to have that understanding that it is a first book.
I think that's fair.
And as you're writing on this next round for your book two, I'm assuming. Well, I guess I shouldn't assume. So, do you feel like it's easier now this go around? I know with the distractions of time removed, how's the writing process?
So it is, there's a few things. Number one is that when you write a book and then learn what all goes into publishing, it makes the next book easier just by default, because you do things differently. Like the formatting automatically way easier, like way better right out of the gate. I don't have nearly as many justs or hads or that's and things like that. Like all that stuff's coming out right away. So yeah, it is fun. What's funny is that for me, find that if I step away from a book for a little while, like when I come back to it, I love it more. So I actually, while I was kind of going through the last, parts of last year, I started writing a fantasy book. And mostly because I wanted to get away from the property I'd been working on this last 2 years so, long and hard. And so I did that, and I got about 40,000 words in, and it's probably still something I will eventually publish. But after doing that and then stepping back to Site Alpha, I was like, oh wow, this book's way better than I remember it. I'm like, well, I wrote it. Like I did just, but so it gave me much more like excitement about writing the new book now, because I had kind of gotten back to these characters and fallen in love with them again, and really remembered like, oh, that's right. That's why I created this character. That's why this person's motivations. And so now when I write the second, as I write, I say as I'm writing it because I am writing it, but it's easier because I can when I come to a part, because I'm a pantser, I'm like, I just do it all. I don't plan anything hardly. So when I get to a certain point, though, it's much easier to make that decision now because I know these characters better. So
Yeah, you get in the mindset and everything. No, that is definitely true. For me, my writing is very convoluted in the sense that, again, with that two paralleling series, and I'll work on one and get like a first draft done, and then I'll go up to the other and get a first draft done. Meanwhile, 3 books prior, I'm getting to an editor, so I'm always like doing this weird little spider web of who's reading what. But then the cool thing about, I guess, that processes, I'm always working, one, which is nice. And two is, when I do go back to either an earlier book that's at a different stage of editing, or flipping between series and doing that kind of reread to kind of refresh, more often than not, I kind of, you kind of get that little joy, and you're like, okay, yeah, I like this book. This makes me feel good because, I always worry. Things did come together nicely. But yeah, I kind of, that's interesting. You go with the cuff with writing, and you say you don't plan anything out, or how You have to know something because you have to know you're breaking up into 3 books. So there is something
Well,
there.
so yeah, a little bit, yes. But so like when I started this book, when I started Side Alpha, I didn't know. I mean, I was basically I was really a pantser with that. Like I would like write a chapter and be like, okay, where are we going next? Okay, let's do the next chapter. I got to the end because about 5 chapters in, I was like, okay, I know what I want my ending to be. Naturally, that's the one that nobody liked, and so I ended up having to change it. But I knew the ending at some point. But I still like I know scenes. Like I'll envision a scene. I'll be driving home on the interstate or something, and I'll see like a moment or a picture of something going on. I'll see the characters doing something, and I'll say, that's going to make it into the book. Where it's going to be, I don't know, but I'm going to make it somehow. I'm going to iron things out that it eventually leads to that scene. And so that's what I've got with the next couple books. I know there's scenes that are going to happen. I know particular scenes that are going to happen. I don't know how they're going to get to those scenes necessarily. In fact, what's funny is that when I did one of the very final edit passes on Site Alpha, it like in that moment in reading through it that last time, I realized there was like a something in the book that could inspire something else in the second book that I'd never considered. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I've got an idea for something now. And so now I know that scene's going to eventually make it in there. I don't know where it's going to be, but it's going to be in there eventually. So.
So here's the question. If you have those scenes in the back of your head, do you ever jot them down in advance knowing that you're going to stick them in, or do you just wait and have them kind of bubbling in the background?
So big writer learning lesson from back in when I very first started writing. I now have a little dash cam in my car and stuff like that, and I will like dictate to myself sometimes scenes as I think about them, or I'll pull it. I've got a little section on my phone. I can't obviously grab it because it's what I'm recording here, but I've got a little section on my phone called book notes, and so like if I'm in the middle of something, I'll be like, quick text to speech, like I need to get this done, So I've done much better about that. But at the beginning, I was just I'd be like, oh, that's a cool scene, and then I totally like think about it for maybe an hour and then forget it, and then maybe it eventually made it there, maybe it didn't. I don't. But I learned my lesson after forgetting too many good scenes. I decided I'm going to start recording them at least in some capacity. So
Yeah, for me, yeah, as convoluted as my writing is, processes wise, when I'm writing and I come up with a scene that's ahead of time, or maybe doing some chores at the house and it pops in my head, I'll run over to my computer and whatever chapter I'm working on whatever book, underneath I have what I call my scrolling notes, and I'll just plop it in and I'll just plug in whatever the scene. Maybe it's just a half a page of dialogue or just notes about, okay, I want to fill in the gap and kind of like quick note, this person talks about this person about this concept to make this happen, and then flesh out later. But I have this like rolling thing, so anytime I open my document, it'll say like 40 pages. Probably 3 are on the actual chapter. The others are notes for all these different series, just the scrolling document of notes, which also those ideas can get lost in that, and I will like finish the book and I'll be like, oh, well, I guess that's not in the book, even after all that.
we'll
But no,
find
it
it
is.
someplace later.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. But that is always interesting, like how people keep track of your little spurts of creativity throughout the day. So no, dictating. I wish I was better at dictating. So that's cool that you do it. So you said you have some camera in your car that you do. So you do a lot of driving then to be able to utilize that
Well,
time that way, or
yeah. So, well, here's the thing. So, when this is something that's also come up on TikTok or something. But I listen to a lot of music when I'm writing. I listen to music, and in that, I mean, I'm listening to like music with words and stuff. And it's something about music to me just like calms me. But my brain starts doing stuff most when I'm doing things that don't involve a lot of thinking. And I know driving should probably involve more thinking than I maybe applied to. But like when I'm
no,
driving,
driving is a great place to think about your book. Actually, I should thought to that. Always concentrate on the road. Don't think about
yes,
anything else but your book.
but yeah, you know, so in those moments when I'm not having to like talk to another human being, if like I'm mowing my lawn, if I'm taking a walk at night or whatever, those are the times that I often like relate most to my characters and think about them the most. And so that's usually when I'm thinking of like scenes and stuff like that. I don't when I'm writing, I'm too in the moment to worry about like what's happening in the future. Um so you know, when I'm writing, it kind of has to be what's in the moment is what I'm concentrating on. But once I'm away from that and nothing else is really going on, or I'm listening to some good music or something, it's like, oh, geez, there it is. You know, it's something will hit me, and I'll be okay. Well, I got to get this jotted down somehow, real quick. So
For me, it usually always is like right when I'm trying to prep food or eat, and then something will. I feel like that happens a lot. Now there are other circumstances, but I always feel like I like take a couple bites, and then I'm running into my office and plugging out some notes, and I come back and I'm like, oh, let me add this in, and I'm like going back and forth. And my food's cold and it's a mess, and oh well. Not a healthy thing to do, but it is a great way to jot down notes. Oh man. Okay, well, since we're right at 8 o'clock, do you have any questions for me that you want to ask, or is there anything
well,
you want to know or talk about in general?
so first and foremost, you mentioned designing that poster. Where did you get such a lovely poster or some such that if a rookie author like myself would be interested in finding something like that, where did you come across that?
Okay, so what I use Vistaprint for my right now. I use them for like obviously my business cards and different kinds of signage because if I before COVID, I did a little more book signings, and so if I were doing like little mini posters or stuff like that, so I just used Vistaprint for one of their poster just templates. Actually, not it wasn't even template; it was a blank one, and I just literally got the covers of my books, and I think it was just on the computer when you pull up a photo. At least I don't know if all computers do this. I'm assuming yes, but again, technology not necessarily super familiar with, but they just allow you to invert a picture. And so I just saved them as inverted files and uploaded them that way. And, you know, that's what I did. But there may be, you know, you could shop around and see there's probably other places outside of Vista that will have that poster template. And mine was obnoxiously big. I didn't realize how big it was. I got really excited. It was like this size, and I just didn't even think about it. So it's kind of this weird giant size that, okay. But that's what I
Okay.
did. And I want to let you know, if you start inverting your cover files, don't upload those inverted cover files to Amazon like I did and then have to like panic and go back and switch them before someone downloads it inverted. Thankfully, it was only my pre-order and pre-orders weren't live, but I was just like, oh, need to flip that real quick before I start talking about that that's an option.
Very good.
The
Very
things you
good.
learn. The mistakes you
Okay, I
make.
got at least one more for you. At least one more. It, who is your favorite character? You've got all these series. I see you've definitely got a lot of books out there. So who's your favorite character if you had to pick one?
See, okay, now that's not nice. As I tell anybody who always asks me this question, it is like picking a child and saying, this is your favorite child. And that's rude. You may have a favorite child. You're not allowed to tell it. No. For me, I mean, I guess it really depends on my mood of the day. Because that can drastically swing it, or where I am in my writing, because I I have characters that I love from all the series that I have for different reasons.
Okay.
And but I guess if I had to pick one at the moment, I would. Well, let me preface by saying I like writing about warrior type women, so I do have some feisty female characters in them, and I love them to death. But my favorite character, or the character I probably should pick as my favorite at the moment, is from the Jed Chronicles, which is my young adult adventure fantasy, world fantasy, if you want to qualify that. But it's because that whole series was based upon my imaginary play with my sister. So there are all these characters and worlds and backstories we developed as young children, and is actually the reason why I wanted to be an author. Put it kind of on the side, the back burner for a while, and have come back to it now as my second series that I started working on. But that is why the main character's name is Katie, because she is my alter ego. So I have to pick her. That is my fault. I have to pick her because she is me as a child, just doing amazing things in alternate realities. So kind of have to pick that one.
That's
How about you?
awesome.
So in your book, is your favorite your main character, or is it actually someone who's a little different because you're working through your
Yeah,
writing process?
so my main character is Charlotte, and I do really enjoy writing Charlotte, but probably the character I relate to the most is Sally DeRosa. She is very much like if she has a lot of things in common with me, like a lot of her attitudes, a lot of her likes and things like that. Very
Yeah.
much kind of I don't want to say it's like a self-insert, but it's definitely like she kind of gets where I'm coming from and vice versa. Like I feel like we'd probably be pretty good friends, you know. So most of the characters are younger. She is more my age group, so that's probably also going to lend a little bit of that too. But yeah, probably Sally is my favorite to write, I should say. So.
Oh no, I think on my
Oh, did
end.
we freeze up?
Oh, I think. Ooh, okay,
Okay.
so if the internet is, I think our internet on my end is a little glitchy. I did
Okay.
see there was one question, and then we may want to wrap up because it's probably on my end that I have very spotty internet. Anyhow, the question says, "What was the most fun to write? What was the one most fun to write?" Okay, well, I guess for me, the most fun. I don't know if you're referring to book or character. So, book right now. I guess it's always the one I'm writing because it's the new one. So that does change. And again, it's so hard to say because each one has its own qualities and quirks and villains and dynamic scenarios. So they kind of switch back and forth. Probably whichever one I'm writing is my favorite one. But as for characters, I've in my Viking series right now, I have several just fun ones because either they're interactions, it's more about the interactions in between characters, or just like they have like quick remarks, you know, it's that kind of smart back and forth dialogue. You know, there's scenarios where they have some interesting, dark, kind of shady backstories. So those kind of things I always like to pull out of. But it's hard again to pick one, and I know that's like going around in a circle and not being fair, but that's kind of the truth. So, how about you? What was your favorite character to write? Since
I think we freezed up
I
again.
know you're only working on your second one, so what's your favorite character to write?
So Sally was probably my favorite in my book, my first book. My actual favorite character right now to write is in my fantasy book. Um, and that is I've got a gnome named Carlo Donegg, and he is kind of a
Yeah,
like a little rapscallion kind of guy, but he is a favorite because he is a character that I played in D&D a long time ago. You mentioned your fiance having characters that were designed and stuff like that. Carlo was like based on a character that I played a long time ago, and he actually I've been a dungeon master for a long time. I still play D&D, not as frequently lately, but in all the worlds I've ever created, Carlos existed in him somewhere. Like he's always a character there. Even if they never meet him, he always exists. And so I finally was like, I need to write a book about this guy. And so anyway, so that's my fantasy game. He is really my favorite because he is just a really
okay.
enjoyable character.
We'll have to, I know, in the near future, come back and talk about D&D inspirations and fan fiction because I have a D&D inspired fan fiction working in the back of my head, but I've never wrote fan fiction, and so I don't know the rules, and I have to go do the research on what you can and can't use and how much change you can do. But
Yep.
yeah, no, that was the thing is when I started doing D&D over the pandemic, I was a way to connect, keep contact with some of my friends and had a lot of fun and fell in love with my own character that I developed so much. I was like, I have to write your story. We're gonna have to have a real good story. I need to like write maybe even a series based in and around you. Oh, I need to do this, and so it's been working in the back of my head. But that's gonna be a little down the road.
All good. Well, when you get to that point, let me know, and we will definitely get together again and have to talk about that. So that'd be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out for this past hour, and it's been a lot of fun for me to finally get to know you because, again, I'm that kind of creeper on the book talk, kind of like watching all these other authors and trying to like learn from everybody. So it's always fun.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. Sincerely. It's this is like my favorite part about getting to interact with the community is doing stuff like this, is getting to talk to folks and finding out like what it is that makes them tick or inspired them to write stuff. It's anyway, it fills me with joy. So I am so grateful to be here and be able to talk to you. So
well, we will do it again in the near future, and I will have to learn more again about your gnome, because that is so funny.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I know my internet is glitchy on my end, so before you freeze again, I am going to say adieu.
Sounds good.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you so much. I look forward to it, Katharine. You take care.